Okay, well, I'm sorry, everyone. We're behind, and we obviously have lots to cover today. So I'm just going to say hello and thank you for being here today. We're here to talk about the state of social harmony in Canada, why it matters, and how to protect and promote it. So welcome here. We had 110 registrations today. Some of the people have said that they're going to watch this later. So welcome to you if you're watching now or if you're watching later. And many come from across the country and the province and even into Europe and the US. So thank you for being here today. My name is Joni Avram, and I'm from Cause and Effect Marketing and Lift Elevated Professional Development. And with me today are Cam Rayner and Jess Weber from RA2. So welcome, Cam and Jess. Cam, you get to tell the backstory about how we met and how we came to do this little project together.
Yeah, thanks, Joni. So Joni and I met through a mutual friend, everyone's favorite centrist Albertan politician, Greg Clark, about half a year ago. And we quite quickly realized that there was a lot of overlap in our interests and what our companies were out to do. So I'll let Jess take it from there.
Yeah, and with Joni, we quickly realized that we share a lot of common concern about polarization and the negative effect this is having on our communities.
Yeah, so we decided we were going to do a research project together, just really trying to understand. And Ian, can you advance, please? We wanted to understand this sort of state of social harmony. Keep going. I think we're a couple over. A little bit more about me. I have done a whole variety of communication projects related to public interest campaigns, everything from shopping local to sexual harassment and assault to food safety and politics and diversification. I also do I'm a part-time sessional lecturer with Ambrose University. Go ahead, please, Ian. And a couple of years ago, I went away to London and did a master's degree in behavioral science from the London School of Economics. And I love their mission statement, which is to transform people and societies by understanding the causes of things. One of the things that we want to do today is help you understand how people tick so that together we can create better communities and communicate better with one another. One more, Ian. Our goal as an organization, as LIFT, is to unite communities, improve communication and connection, and uplift humanity. Next.
Yeah, so I lost my notes here. RA2 uses market research and machine learning to improve communications and strategy. We provide digital web and communication services, especially with a platform called Nation Builder, and deliver research and data-driven communication strategies.
We also want to acknowledge that we have built much of this, our methodology around the work of these scholars and this organization, More in Common, which has done very similar work. Next, please. Also want to acknowledge Boomer, who is our resident dog, and he's usually very quiet, but he hates delivery people, so he may make his voice heard at some point in this conversation. So welcome, Boomer. Just a little bit on our background, what we're talking about when we talk about common ground.
With common ground, we're referring to shared beliefs and goals that emphasize our common humanity. And these are the things that enable people to work together.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning here that one assumption that we're making is that people are acting in good faith. So we're not talking about people that might be out for like illegal motives or something like that.
So our meeting agenda is we're going to do, in addition to introductions with ourselves, we're going to allow you to enter into some small groups on the back, to enter into some breakout rooms that you're going to stay with through the duration of this presentation. Introduce yourselves, just get to know one another a little bit. Then we're going to bring you back. We're going to go over the research results. We're going to then allow you to break out again, do some practice sessions with one another and just talk through some of the training, some of the methodology and how to apply it. Then we're going to come back, talk about, give each other a bit of time for reflection, and then we'll close. We originally booked 90 minutes, so we'll see how we do. We're scheduled to close at 1:15. So Ian, can you go back one? In the current environment, I just wanted to check in with people, just using the chat. Anyone want to offer up what you see as your biggest communication challenge that you're facing right now as communicators, educators, community leaders? Just throw up what you're thinking about or feeling in the chat. Yeah, agreeing on what the facts are. Audience fatigue, too much information. Why listen to one person over another? Polarization, dealing with diverse stakeholders, high emotions, face-to-face, lots of things that are at the table here. That's awesome. So I think just in terms of helping everyone understand where everyone's coming from, it's really important for us to understand contextually we're all dealing with a very complex communication environment. We know that the world is a scary and it's a scary and changing place all the time, and the pace is even greater right now. So keeping that in mind, we're going to break you into breakout rooms. We just want to give you 5 minutes to get to know one another. And then we're going to bring you back and actually go through the presentation. So, Ian, can you go ahead and do that?
Yes, I can. Just bear with me 1 second here, and everyone will pop into a group.
Just keep in mind when you do go into your groups, just keep a track of the number that you're in, because we're going to move you back into the same group at the end of the session. And Ian, if you can forward, just advance to slide 1, we'll give them the question that we want people to discuss. Shall we go? All right, I just wanted to remind everyone of why social harmony matters and why I'm particularly concerned about this topic. We know that divided communities are characterized by low trust, feelings of powerlessness, and lack of belonging. Next, please. And when people become convinced of their powerlessness, they will stop trying to affect change, even when change is possible. And that's not the kind of community I want to live in. And I always say this to people: we cannot fight for the common good if we're too busy fighting with each other. So the other thing to keep in mind when we talk about social harmony is social harmony seems like a little bit of a kumbaya statement, but and we have this notion that we're kind of wired to look after our own interests and be kind of selfish in our approach to life, but that's not actually true. The research suggests that cooperation is socially rewarding. We are wired to connect and cooperate, and we will sacrifice self-interest for the sake of the public good as long as we think that others will do the same. And that's why this research is so important, because we're talking about really what people believe around the social norms around polarization. Next, please, Ian. So we are highly influenced by social norms, but there's a perception versus reality thing at play all the time. If we believe that our community is polarized, and if we listen to the narrative that's in the world right now, we're more likely to believe that prevailing narrative and follow suit. But if we believe that others want to find common ground and collaborate, we are more likely to do the same. So keep that in mind. So our goal here was to test the narrative that Canada is largely a divided country. And we really wanted to use that information then to kind of challenge some of those, the perceptions of social norms that we are behaving in ways that suggest that we're very divided. And the way that I have used social norms theory and social norms communication in the past to affect positive social change relates to this campaign called I Believe You, which was and still is a sexual a campaign to help people understand how to respond to someone who's been sexually assaulted. And what we did here was we made the norm, we made the concept of believing as a first step a social norm, which, believe it or not, 5 years ago was not the case. And we really did a good job of communicating and making people understand that this was normal behavior, and it was what more and more people were doing. Now contrast that to the image on the right, which was more about how do we talk about sexual assault in terms of the behavior. We want to, and making that sort of forbidden behavior normative, we wanted to make the positive behavior normative. So that's next slide, please. That's the, and this approach worked very well to create new outcomes around sexual assault response in this province. So you can see the percentage of people who gave a positive response went up dramatically over the time of the campaign, and the number of people who would say, I believe you, again, went up dramatically. So this is the sort of concept we were applying, same idea. Next, please, Ian, around how do we change the way we talk and think about social norms, especially around this question of polarization and division. So we've set out to see if there's a perception gap around this question and whether we could use the results then to communicate a different kind of norm around this topic. Next. So here's what we found. I'm going to let Cam and Jess weigh in terms of the results.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So in November, we surveyed just shy of 1,600 Canadians to get a demographically representative sample of Canada, with the exception of like French-speaking Canada. It was an English survey, and the research was self-funded by RA2 and Cause and Effect Marketing. Next year. We asked 3 questions about the social desirability of cooperation. So in this first question, we found that 82% of Canadians felt that in Canada our differences are not so large that we can come to are not so large and we can come together, as opposed to our differences being too large that we can't come together. And one of the surprising things about this statistic in particular was that it wasn't any different across different regions. So people who were in British Columbia or Ontario were just as likely as people who were in Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. So that prevailing notion that we feel like the country is maybe divided, or Western alienation, people can't get along, didn't hold up.
And with this one, we found that 2/3 of Canadians prefer people to listen to others and to compromise. And I guess just a general finding that we found across these questions is like Cam mentioned, this held true across different regions in Canada, across the genders in Canada, and it was very consistent. And maybe I'll pass it back to Cam to talk about any differences we did find.
There you go to the next slide again. So the final one we asked is if people prefer to find common understanding with others, even if they have different beliefs, or if people's beliefs are so unlike theirs that they couldn't have anything in common. And again, about 3/4 said that they seek to find common understanding. So really the norm is to seek this common understanding. The only real demographic difference that we saw was age, and that wasn't surprising based on other research that we've done. And typically, if you're younger, you're a bit more combative, and if you're older, you become sort of less combative, which pans out across a lot of different studies, not just this one. Although in all cases, it was still the majority that preferred the common understanding or to seek cooperation. And the final point I'll just say on this is that the way the questions were wording is it's not a given that it should be more socially desirable to say find compromise with others rather than fight for what you believe in. So the fact that is the more desirable, the thing that people are seeking and find more desirable, is sort of heartwarming.
We need to skip this one, Ian. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to feed back to us just in the chat reaction to these results off the top of your head. Surprised? Yeah. And we are going to talk relieved, encouraged. Yeah, I think yeah, it's a interesting. We presented these findings to media, and it's funny how many of them said it gives them a sense of hope. And one person asked if we found this differs based on topic. So no, we were just asking a very specific question related to willingness, generally speaking. Are you willing to find common ground with people who don't share your perspective on any given issue? So that's really that. We didn't ask for specific issues per se. And we even broke this down relative to political persuasion. And we even found that people who have extremely strong political leanings, even they, on the majority of those folks, wanted to seek common ground. Yeah, it's actually really interesting is that what we're believing and what we're telling each other is really part of the problem here. And that's one of the things we want to address with this content. So, Ian, I'm going to get you to forward us, please. So if we're more aligned than we think, then how should we use this information to communicate? And I'm going to throw a couple of things at you, and I want you, I just really want you to sort of take this in and digest it in a way that might challenge some of your assumptions. So one of the things in order to affect social change or to create this sense of greater harmony, protect and promote harmony, is to make in-group and out-group identities less salient and common identities more salient, which means we focus on common ground. We're more focused on our similarities than our differences, and we correct the belief that people in out-groups are quite different than us. So I'm going to let you forward, please, Ian. Now, making differences less salient can increase empathy, reduce bias, and promote trust and cooperation. I'm going to throw it back at you. Why do you think that is? Anyone? I feel a little bit like when I'm teaching in class and nobody wants to speak up and I have to pick on somebody. We are more alike than we think. Yeah. So maybe Ian, I'll go ahead and I'll answer this question. It helps reduce the fear. Yes. We're not as invested in difference. Yes. And really, at the end of the day, we're highly attuned to who is us and who is them. Although they've done research, little in experiments, and if you divide groups into people into groups based on the toss of a coin and give one group a certain color T-shirt and another group a certain color T-shirts, it causes people to discriminate in favor of in-groups automatically. It's like just how we're wired. We are wired to protect our own and see those in other groups as being dramatically different and not part of our family. And that forces us, it inclines us to treat them differently and not inclusively. So next slide. And remember, if any of you know, some of you probably know this, our brains have like two channels. One of them is fast thinking, reflexive, automatic, effortless. And then the other one is slow thinking, deliberate, effortful. And the channel that we're really focused on here is the fast thinking channel. It's the one that makes quick assumptions, takes cues, it makes associations between those who are like me and those who are not like me. So the goal here with creating community is to emphasize what we have in common rather than what we have, what makes us different. Next, please. I also like to use this quote, we're not thinking machines that feel, but we're feeling machines that think. And so there is something about attaching and inviting, inciting an emotional response that's positive, that makes dramatic change in terms of how we feel, how we think, and how we behave. Next, please. So sharing stories of human virtue and common good makes us want to be equally loving and good. This we know from research. Anyone want to weigh in on why? Yes, Tracy Wood. You are right. We basically, Tracy says, we move the group to being all humans instead of our tribe, then our emotions shift. Exactly. We make this idea of who us is, including everybody, rather than this notion that there's sort of this divide. And that automatically creates, it creates an environment where we're much more able to make quick, positive decisions and behave in ways that are pro-social. Now, I hear people talking about whether we should be slow thinkers or intentional thinkers and all that. And the truth is, we can't necessarily control some of that stuff. It's very automatic. And so especially in high risk environments, very complex environments, and very high changing environments, we are more likely to default to this fast thinking channel. And that's why we need to understand how we're wired and how to speak to that channel in ways that are going to create the positive outcomes that we want to see happen. So next, please, Ian. So just some of the emotional responses that we're getting, and I'm trying to follow along and see how you guys are tracking. You're all definitely tracking with us. Just think about the two different basic emotions, shame and disgust, versus elevation and uplifting people. So the stories of shame and disgust, when we call people out, we actually make them feel devalued, and we increase potential for hostility and division. On the other hand, when we talk about stories of human good, we enable people to embrace this more loving, hopeful, and optimistic view of the world and one another that causes us to behave in ways that are positive. And so I always say, call people up, don't call them out. And it's very important to understand that these positive messages automatically can reduce prejudice and encourage empathy and collaboration. We don't have to work at this. And that's why I think it's super important. They don't just make us feel good, they build our capacity for thinking and acting better. That's a super important point. And it actually, these skills, the physical, social, and cognitive resources that are built through positive emotions help us flourish as humans, as individuals, and as communities. Next, please. Here's just a simple example. That I saw this on Twitter a while ago, this idea that somebody told a story of how her son bought a car, the car dealer sold it to him, took the cash, counted out $1,000, gave it back to him and said, good luck in college, pay it forward. Unbelievably kind, brought tears to my eyes. Now this is interesting. Like, obviously we had, she got a lot of likes on this, but what's interesting to me is when you see this kind of story, even hear about this kind of story, it has a personal effect on people as witnesses. We feel differently. We have a warmth in our chest. We feel joyful and optimistic, hopeful. It restores our hope in humanity, makes us want to reach out and be better people. All of these things happen in an instant in that fast thinking brain. And this is the kind of thing that we want to promote more of rather than less. So what we see and what we talk about, the stories that we tell each other influence how we feel and how we act. So positive modeling makes us want to do good, and also it makes us feel like we can do that. We see someone else do it, we think, well, if they can do it, maybe I can too. So it creates a sense of confidence. Next, please. One more. I know that, one more, please, Ian. I know that one question that sometimes comes up in this conversation is, if we focus on stories of human good, how do we acknowledge lived experience of exclusion? And my answer to that is that if you start with a positive frame, that allows you, the context changes. You can increase trust and empathy and reduce fear in people in conversation, and you can enable a more constructive conversation about lived experience. So that's my answer to that. And then overall, just as a takeaway, I hope you remember that if we focus on common good and messages that reflect common good, we are more likely to increase care, concern, and compassion for others, and that is the goal. Next, please. Any other reactions that you want to post?
I would just like to comment, Joni, that I think also empathy encourages an individual to see different points of view. So those different perspectives or different points of view then is also the ability of the individual to embrace ambiguity as well, which I think we need to hold together.
Yeah, it's a good point. When we talk about values, that's exactly where we're going next. We're going to talk about how do human values and how they break down in our world. How do they influence how we see the world and how we react to it? So I think maybe we'll just move over to that and give it over to Jess and Cam.
Yeah. So the next perfect segue. We'll talk about common values and using that as a strategy to create empathy. So if we're trying to be uplifting and connect with a lot of different people that might be seeking that common understanding or seeking that cooperation, we sort of need to give an ability for them to enter that conversation. Next. So quickly to start, just to establish what we mean when we talk about values. So the easiest way, I think, to get your head around them is to differentiate them from opinions and attitudes. So opinions are things that you hold in the moment, and they change from moment to moment, and they're about the specific thing. So you might have an opinion about how this workshop is going, and it might change in 15 minutes from now. You might have an opinion about all sorts of things, and about a news article that you read, and then you might have a different opinion about it the next day if you read a different one. Attitudes are sort of slower to change, and they're about specific things. So you might have an attitude about tipping as to whether or not you leave like large tips or small tips, and that would be specific to that situation. But then values are deeply rooted and change maybe once or twice in a person's lifetime. And they're related to the things that really matter in life, and they're highly emotional and they motivate action. They're the ideas that people orient their lives around, and they're what drive their decision making and help them choose between various options or pursuits. Yeah. So in a nutshell, the values relate to the things that really matter in life, and they are highly motivating.
So the values that we use in this research are called the basic human values. They were first developed by the social psychologist Shalom Schwartz in 1992. And since then, people have been researching them continually. New research comes out every year on these basic human values. And the big finding, the thing that really drew us to this system, is that these values are consistently present all around the world. And they show up everywhere. So like in this scheme, what we see is these 10 basic values around a circle. And then within each kind of like wedge, we see these little specific components of that value. And think back, if you completed the self-assessment survey before the workshop, you would have seen which values are ranked more or less important to you based on this system. And something to point out is that there's no bad values on here. They're all goals that people can direct their life towards. Like Cam mentioned, they're all motivating and they drive action. And it's just a way that can help us understand how good people can disagree on what's important in life.
Actually, Ian, if you go back a slide again, the way that the values are organized across this page is important. So the values that are next to each other are really commonly shared together. So they kind of, the further apart the value is, the less likely, say, that someone would have those two values as being important. And we can kind of think of them as being a bit in tension with each other. So if someone is very, very concerned with on the universalism aspect in the top, which has sort of environmentalism, social justice sort of aspects of it, that can be in tension with like sort of wanting to be in charge, or these wanting to achieve a lot of things, values that you can see sort of across the chart from them. So when we're thinking about these values, we're often thinking about how we can think about the diversity of values that an audience or people or a culture holds, and how we can tie in and include more of those values. Next, please. So just for everyone's interest, when we surveyed across Canada, we found overall that the universalism and benevolence values, which are very social focused, were the top ones. So I'll just run through briefly what all 10 of these are and explain where they're coming from with them. So universalism really has to do with the global good, like all for one, one for all, and doing things that benefit everyone, for the planet, ideas of like social justice for all, so human rights, environmentalism fall into this category. Benevolence is more to do with the local community and family, friends, those sort of things. So if you care a lot about looking after your friends and family, then you would be high on this value. Security has to do with both physical security and social security, so stability, but also being free from like threats of violence. Self-direction is to do with freedom, to be able to choose your own path, do the things that you want to do. Conformity, I think, is an interesting one, and it's to do with wanting to fit in, wanting to get along, not wanting to offend other people, wanting to be a good, be a loyal friend, that sort of thing. This one, hedonism, has a probably negative connotation to most people immediately, but the way that they refer to it, the psychologists refer to it, is that it means sort of fun, wanting sort of immediate pleasures, that sort of thing. So if someone like want to have a good time, then they might be higher on this value. Stimulation is to do with excitement. Like skydiving would be a very high stimulation activity, probably. Tradition is to do with like maintaining the ways that you've done things, like the way that you were taught how to do something, and passing along that to, say, the next generation. And then achievement is sort of getting the promotion, making your project a success, that sort of thing. And power is to do with sort of having agency, being in charge, and sort of being recognized and having some status and dignity. Next slide. So the key takeaway here is that it's not that people don't care about what you care about, it's that it's not the only thing. And for most people, they will be able, you can probably, as you're reading through these, you could probably understand and empathize with why someone might think that's important, or that might be an important goal for someone, even if it's not your number one. So it's a way that you can think, can start to understand where other people might be coming from and what might be motivating them, and why you're not connecting. I think this one's yours, Joni.
Yeah, we just talked. This is a topic that came up a lot when we first presented this research to others. It was right around Christmas time. The media were saying, "Well, how do we use this when we're having family dinners?" And the conversation, the message we really had for people is that these conversations can be more peaceful if you see people through a lens of common values, and you try to understand not what their position is or but as much as understanding what's driving that perspective and where their values are coming from. Or even saying something to someone like I often say, let's say you have an uncle who's just a bit maybe on the fringe in terms of a political perspective. You could say to somebody like that, if it were true, you would give someone the shirt off your back. I know that you're that kind of person and you really care about people. But what I don't get is why you think the way you do about this topic, because it doesn't seem to connect. When you address someone in those terms, starting from a place of acknowledgement, giving them a compliment, making them feel heard and respected, they're going to respond to you in a very different way. So that's really the point here, is to speak through a lens or communicate with people through a lens of common values. And we're going to show you now what that means and how to apply it in a real life scenario. I think we're on next. When we have a range of constituents, which everybody does, you're all talking to a diverse group of stakeholders. You have to, and all of those stakeholders have different values. That necessarily requires you as a communicator to communicate with a range of messages that reflect those values. So we often think that, we have to have a key message, a set of key messages, and we have to say those key messages again and again and again. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you do have to have key messages, but you don't necessarily have to have the same message for every audience or communicate it in exactly the same way. There are little tweaks and nuances that will definitely change the way people respond to your message. So here's a real life example that I want to show you about how we use different messages to communicate a social issue and encourage a different kind of engagement in an issue that is very complex. So I'm working again with this group, with the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services, to develop a campaign on sexual harassment. It's a province-wide campaign. It's going to be released in the spring. You're getting a sneak peek. This is a very typical approach to sexual harassment communication and training. We showcase the negative behavior. We even sometimes caricaturize perpetrators, and we also use these statements like, it's not a joke, it's sexual harassment, and we very much focus on giving people information rather than trying to communicate to them in ways that reflect their values. So forward, please. What we know about this approach is that it actually leads to increased disaffection of workers, increased turnover, perpetrators more likely to be accepting of such behavior. Remember, because it normalizes the behavior, it makes it look common, less risky, and it results in fewer women managers and men more likely to blame victims and think women who report are making it up or overreacting. So traditional approaches to communicating sexual harassment are part of the problem. Next, please. So our question was, what if we took a values-based approach to sexual harassment messaging? Next. First of all, we needed to understand what do people actually want. So we went out and asked Albertans, what do you care about when it comes to work? What does a safe workplace even look like? What are the values at play here? And we knew, we heard in both focus groups and some quantitative testing that people want, their priority issue is around healthy, safe, productive, and innovative workplaces that have our backs. Sexual harassment is not a top of mind issue. So if we lead with sexual harassment as the main message, we are not going to get as far as if we lead with, if we frame the conversation relative to the values that people tell us they care about. So that's the first thing I want you to, oh, not done. Go back, please. We also know that they want to be allies and they want to understand the tips and tools for creating better workplaces. People are wired to collaborate. We want to protect people. We want to keep not only ourselves safe, but other people safe. That's a very strong inner desire and a value. And then also the point here I want to emphasize is we want to believe it's possible to do something about sexual harassment, because typically when we talk about these topics, we make these social problems so big and insurmountable that they seem like they seem intractable. We can't do anything about them. So why even bother? Why try? Why engage? That's sort of, again, that's the fast thinking part of our brain. That automatic response is like, really, I just don't feel like I can personally do much about this topic. So we wanted to make people believe it's possible to do something about sexual harassment by making telling them real life scenarios of how to create great workplaces and let them see themselves in those scenarios and make that behavior seem attainable and make it into some copycat behavior. So next, please, Ian. So we wanted to showcase good people doing good work. We want to talk about respected leaders who build cultures of trust that help stop sexual harassment. This is our main message. Respected leaders That's an identity. That we're talking about identity. We're talking about my self-perception. That's a super big value proposition. We want to talk about building cultures of trust that not only that help stop sexual harassment, but we also want to talk about the fact that cultures of trust create workplaces that are innovative, productive, reduce employee turnover, increase loyalty, make organizations more sustainable. So there's a lot at play here rather than just a narrow focus on sexual harassment per se. So here's an example of this is just in draft form. We're talking about the fact that respected leaders build these cultures of trust that help stop sexual harassment. And then we're speaking to a time that the boss silenced the catcalls. And this is a very relatable, accessible kind of story that everyone can understand. It's a positive frame. And in the next slide, please, it also speaks to the value of security. This one is a real life, it's a very emotional vignette that speaks to the time the boss asked if everything was okay and it wasn't. Again, it's extremely relatable. It draws us in. It creates a sense of compassion and empathy because we can feel what this person is feeling. But it also relates to next please, it relates to a very specific value of security, but also benevolence and caring. It makes us want to reach out and care for this person. It creates that empathic context in which we can communicate have this conversation. And then the last one is the time the boss trusted us and we nailed it. Now this seems like an odd thing for a sexual harassment agency or a sexual assault agency to be talking about, is celebrating this sort of personal achievement. But it speaks to this next value around personal achievement and helps people understand that personal achievement, security, benevolence, and caring all work together to create the kind of environment that we all want. We want workplaces that have our backs, and how that looks and shows up to people can be very different. So next slide, please. The bottom line is if we appeal to people's values, identities, and emotions, we can enhance our ability to connect with them and their ability to connect with us. And we tend to think persuasion is about information, but it's not. It's more about relationship. We can persuade based on relationship versus if we have the relationship, we're much more persuadable because people trust us and have a sense of connection. And they also feel like you understand them. When you're communicating in ways that resonate with people, it tells them that you get them, and that builds trust.
And it's also worth mentioning, I think, here that oftentimes that trust is the facts are interpreted based on the relationship. So one of the questions I think from earlier on was that we don't seem to have the same facts, and it's true. And people are assessing there's been a number of studies that people, if they see something on social media, they assess the accuracy of the information based on what the reputation or the relationship they have with the person, not the sort of trustworthiness of the news source. So the personal connection overrides the sort of facts-based approach. Next slide.
So here we are going to take a look at how some brands are already using values-based messaging to connect with different audiences. And we had some fun here contrasting the Home Depot and Canadian Tire. And in here we can see the Home Depot, they emphasize achievement, empowerment, whereas Canadian Tire focuses on family, relationships, and caring for others, traditions. Next. Similar thing, same comparison, Canadian Tire and Home Depot. And of course, just want to mention here that these two particular brands don't just talk in this way, but these examples illustrate the different ways that brands can talk about the same thing, like the same product, through relating to different values and thus relating to different audiences. Next, Ian. This one, power tools. So again, Home Depot with achievement, empowerment, Canadian Tire with relationships and family. Next.
Yeah, so when we bring this back to the universal values, you can see on the wheel here, our guest did make an appearance. I see on the wheel here that these examples from Home Depot here are more in this bottom quadrant, and then the examples that we drew from Canadian Tire are in this other top quadrant. So just an example of how these sort of similar stores or product offerings can be positioned in a way that will, say, resonate with different value sets. Next. So in the study, we looked at how empathizing with the values that audiences care about can change how positively or negatively they perceive the messaging. So the messages that we have here are all from the same financial institution, and we sort of highlighted areas where they're talking about different aspects of human values and relating to a whole wide variety of them. And then we tested these different messages to see if the message resonated, when the message resonated with values that the respondent told us were highly important to them, did they find that message, did they respond to that message more positively, sort of regardless of the content of the message otherwise. So we tested these with Net Promoter Score, and we've broken out the Net Promoter Score by promoters and detractors. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Net Promoter, it measures the likelihood that someone would share your message with friends and family. And this secondary sharing is really important because people don't absorb these messages in isolation. They actually they talk about them with others, and if they can't relate those messages to what others care about, then they get negative social feedback about them, which leads them to disregard the message. So for a while with online digital advertising, micro-targeting was really the thing, and you wanted to get a specific message to a specific person, and they would like that message, and that would drive engagement with the idea. And I think when we debriefed on a large project that we worked on in Australia, and one of the pieces of feedback that we got from one of the major tech companies was that the secondary conversations really mattered. So if you got that message in front of the person and it was a specific message for that specific person, like, yes, they might hit that like button on Facebook, but then when they went and talked to their friends and told them, hey, I saw this thing on Facebook, if their friend said that's nonsense, then that easily took precedence over that micro-targeted advertisement. So it was important to connect to like a broad set of messages. So so similar here, like when we saw when the message spoke to a value that the person, like it related to a value that a person cared about, they were about twice as likely to want to promote or talk about that message. And then when it didn't, and this could be like largely the same messages, they were more likely to say not promote it, and maybe even be a detractor and say sort of and be like actively against the message. Next.
So this all matters because messages that speak to different values bring different people into the conversation. It shows different people that certain conversations are in fact relevant and meaningful to them, and that they have like a place in the tent, like Joni said before. It brings more people into the conversation.
So a very simple example is with messaging for, say, like a coffee shop, and this assumes that this coffee shop wants to appeal to the widest number of people possible. If in the set on the left, you can see like we have local community. They're talking about their role in the community. They're talking about their fair trade, ethical sourcing, their environmental friendly packages, and their support for like a local charity. And these messages will all very strongly appeal to that top, like that universalism, that benevolence values, those sentiment, and it would work very well, and I think would be good messages. Contrast that with the one on the right, where you see like local community, high quality, like new items to try, and that's bringing in like an additional set of values. So if you wanted to reach a specific audience that had a certain set of values, and that was a really niche message, then the message on the left might work. But for these larger, broader public conversations or things that are supposed to bring in like that big tent, large support, if you tie to more values, then more people can see themselves or see how that's relevant to them.
The basic message that we want to leave you with is messages that are relevant and resonant and speak to these different values make you as a communicator more credible and trusted. And that's part of the reason, I mean, that's part of the outcome that we want to help you generate. I often say to people, if you speak to people's values, then you don't have to convince them of anything. You only have to remind them of what they already know. And that makes your job easier. And it makes engagement tremendously easier. Okay, I think we're into breakout now. So one of the things, I'm going to let you guys explain this, but we thought we would give you a chance to take some of these concepts around values and think about how do you apply them in a real life scenario, and just have a bit of time to spend maybe 10 minutes now with some of the folks who are in your breakout and just talk about how to break down different messages for different organizations based on what we've been talking about. So we're going to do that. I think what we should do is plan on 10 minutes, if that's okay. And then maybe a little bit more, like 10 to 12, and then we'll bring everyone back for a bit of a debrief and a close. Cam, do you want to set this up?
I'll give an intro into the breakout sessions. So like Joni mentioned, in the same groups we were before, we're going to practice expressing messages to reflect different values. We're going to be using the platform Miro. So this is a platform that's just like a giant whiteboard and it has these electronic sticky notes. In a few minutes, we'll drop a link to Miro in the chat. So every group is going to go into the same big Miro board, and you're going to find the section of the Miro board that is numbered, that corresponds with your breakout group number. And you'll see the values wheel next, Ian. So you'll see this values wheel and a few sticky notes above it. And we have 3 message topics, and pick one of the topics and try voicing the message to resonate with a few different values, similar to what Cam showed in the coffee shop example. So next slide, Ian. So the 3 topics is, these are also on the Miro board, so no need to take notes. A local coffee shop, a poverty NGO, and kind of a PSA around an initiative against distracted driving. And if you have any questions, you can always shoot us messages in the chat in Zoom.
So I just want to, somebody has mentioned that they were worried about the group number. Pam, you're going to automatically be reasserted into that same group. And I'm not sure if the group number matters or where we find, I couldn't find the group number either.
Yeah, when you get put into your group, there'll be a little pop-up that says like you're being put into breakout group 5 or something like that. And then if you don't see a breakout group, if no one in your group sees one, just claim a random board and stake it out for yourselves.
Group numbers listed on the top of the screen while you're in the breakout.
Yeah, and you come up with if you think about different ways that someone could talk about the merits of one of these different initiatives, you just write the message on a sticky note and then try to think about where that would sit on the different values and try to think about different messages that would sit on a different spot on the values chart.
So realistically, we're only going to have time for one. So just pick one issue or organization you're interested in and just play around with these values and think about how to reframe different messages from an organization based on those values. That's the goal. Welcome back, everyone. We're just going to wait on others to come back in. Ian, they all come. Oh, they don't come back.
They got about 5 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have everyone back now. Coming out of that, is there anything that stood out or any insights you'd like to share with the rest of the group? We also sort of have a few minutes for 1 or 2 questions if there's any questions that we want to address right now.
Age, how to appeal to a wide audience. Benevolence is either other values or more challenging. It made it easier to see why particular campaigns are memorable and resonant. It's not as easy as it sounds, that's right. And interesting to view issues from values and really to speak from a values-based perspective. So that's the feedback we got. I think, given that we're at 1:12, we should probably wrap, and maybe we'll just do a little bit of, we have a few slides to close. And if anyone, obviously, if you want to reach out to anyone, we'll have our contact information at the end. Any questions, comments, etc., just feel free to reach out. But maybe, Ian, we'll move to the next slide. I thought this was a good question. One word that describes what you'll take away from today. Anyone want to offer up? Positive, empathy, connection. Hope. Isn't it interesting? Hope used to be one of my least favorite words. It felt like a very kind of wishy-washy word to me, and I was always like, now I really love the word hope because it's so empowering. So people are saying that they feel fascinated, optimistic, open to possibilities, new relationships. That was thought-provoking. They feel tooled up. They want to know more and thankful. So there you go. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Let me just a couple of slides to close, and then we'll let you get away on time here. Key takeaways: focus on inclusion, empathy, and inclusive and empathic communication. Speak to this idea of positive identity, positive emotion, and positive norms. If you want people to follow certain behaviors, don't tell them what not to do, tell them what to do. Focus on building trust and credibility and enhance your reputation. If you do all these things, enhanced reputation and influence will follow. I just want to acknowledge that we are recording this and we can share it. Not sure, I guess what we can do is share it with everybody who's registered. So if you want, we'll just automatically send you the recording. Go ahead, Ian, next. And we're also talking about what should come next in this series of conversations around professional development. What should we be offering? We're talking about doing, the next thing we can do for you is values-based personas and audience segmentation based on these values that sort of help you understand the different personalities that are at play. Case study on sexual harassment. I can actually take you through all the research and all the methodology that was used to come up with the sexual harassment approach. And then we're just talking as well about how to build a subscriber-based professional development community and curriculum. And so, oops, there we are. There we have a poll. Anyone, yeah, there you go. Just
And if there's anything else that you're kind of interested in, just drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear about what stood out for you and what you'd like to hear and see more of.
While we're waiting for that poll, maybe you can change the slide, please, Ian. So the bottom line I want you to be left with is that if we publicize stories of common values and common good, we can create a contagious upward spiral of good, a spiral effect, a positive spiral effect that leads to more compassion, more love, and more harmony. And that's what we need right now. So thank you all for joining. I think last slide is just some contact information if anyone wants it. And practice tools for facing challenging, sensitive conversations, speaking up. Okay, so we've taken all your notes. We're going to go through the chat. We'll contact you directly if we have any follow-up questions or comments. Or other than that, we really appreciate you coming. We'll let you know what the next offering will be. And Cam and Jess, if you have anything else you want to add, you can.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending today. And yeah, like what Joni said, we will be following up with those couple of items.
Okay. Well, even though we got late started, we are almost finished on time. So we're going to say goodbye. And maybe Cam, Jess, and Ian, maybe if all of us can just stay on and do a bit of a debrief. But everyone else, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you very much for attending, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank you, Joni. Great job.
Thank you, Erica. We'll talk next week.
Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Joni.
Thanks, David. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I love seeing everyone. Oh, I miss seeing everyone's face in real life, though.
Joni and Cameron and Jessica, that was fantastic. It's just another paradigm shift. It changes the way you look at, I don't know, it's like you're looking at it one way, and then the way you do the presentation, it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. It's just like...
You're on the right track, Kate.
No, you're just so, it's concrete. I love the data behind it, and it just resonates. Why is no one else saying this stuff? I mean, anyway, I love it. Thank you so much. It was the best hour of my week.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Kate is
Thanks
one of
so
my
much,
favorite people, and we are having cocktails. I will send you a note. We are going to do it.
I love you guys madly, and thank you for doing this. It's lovely to be able to learn still so much, and you guys are fantastic teachers. I really thank you. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.